Luxman has a rich history in hi-fi dating back 100 years. That's right. This year, coming up, 2025, is the 100th anniversary of Luxman. And today, we're going to hear about the rich history of the brand. And we're going to learn about the products that they're building to commemorate those 100 years. So joining me to give a detailed history of Luxman is John Pravel, the VP of Sales for Luxman America. Tell me a little bit about the history of Luxman, because it's a storied history that's approaching 100 years.
That's quite right.
Let's get into that.
That's quite right. So Luxman began in 1925 in Japan at the dawn of the radio broadcasting era and the need for radio receivers. So, like the UK, which set up the BBC, in Japan, also an island nation, they set up something called the NHK, or a National Broadcasting System. And once the equipment became available for them to do it, the first equipment was invented in the West, and it was imported into Japan. They did not have their homegrown industry for radio production and radio equipment transmission at that point, so it was imported equipment at first. Two brothers started Luxman. They had a picture frame store in Osaka, and they saw the potential. They understood and realized the potential of this fledgling radio broadcasting technology and radio communication technology. And they began importing foreign to Japan, but foreign-made radio receivers and vacuum tubes, which had just been invented and, made it possible for radio to actually happen in the first place. Because before vacuum tubes, you had nothing. You had telegraph, right? You had Morse code as communication. You had no voice communication, wireless voice communication. That was impossible. So the vacuum tube was key. It was a recent invention. Radio broadcasting was happening around the world, certainly Europe, the United States, Japan. A little later, they became involved with it, and it was a very fast track for them. Those early years were spent searching the world for radio playback equipment, buying foreign-made radios. And as time went by, they realized that to really grow this business, they had to create a homegrown industry in Japan for radio receiver production and vacuum tube production, and all of the component parts that go into an AM radio and so forth, switches and controls and the things that you need to make it all work. The early years of the company were devoted to those efforts: radio reproduction, radio vacuum tubes, and so forth. Later on, they added to that phonograph reproduction, and at first mono, but phonograph playback. Or you could connect a phonograph, a turntable, to a radio with another input, and you were able to listen to records, early recordings, 78s and so forth. By the 1950s, the company had developed even further and had gone into the component audio product business. So beyond just table radios and radio consoles, actual separate components, separate amplifiers that were not stereo at that point, but they were amplifiers, separate amplifiers. So you had a separate preamplifier, a separate low-powered vacuum tube power amplifier, and then later, in the later 1950s, an integrated amplifier, which, if you take a look at Luxman's museum, which you can through our website, luxmanamerica.com, or if you're ever able to go to Japan and take a look, they actually made one of the first integrated amplifiers ever with a VU meter display on the front panel. It was a single VU meter with a switch for channel A and channel B. That was after they introduced stereo, but they had a single VU meter on a mono integrated amplifier. By the late 50s, early 60s, stereo was happening, and Luxman was going through tremendous growth in Japan. Some of the products were actually exported to other countries at that point. And of course, with stereo, it was really a very steep learning curve and a steep ramp up in terms of production and new models and increases in the technology, in terms of like development of the technology, further development of the technology. Luxman was the first company in Japan to actually use negative feedback, and they patented it for Japan. I'm not sure about worldwide patents, but they had the first patent in Japan for the use of negative feedback to cancel distortion at the circuit level, at the circuit board level. So they were addressing things that hadn't even been thought of yet in other parts of the world, and this, has continued up and through today, where feedback and distortion control is sort of a hallmark of Luxman designs even now. Throughout the 1970s, there was more growth, the advent of solid-state Luxman electronics, and the establishment of the first subsidiary of Lux Corp, because it was called Lux Corp back at that time. The Luxman brand was established in the United States around 1974-75 with their own office in the U.S. and Lux Products became more readily available in the United States, and that's when my involvement with the brand started. So I remember all of those vintage models. I worked with them every day. It was a lot of fun. They were great product, great people, and these products today are part of your history, your experience as the vintage Luxman products that you have sought to restore and sell and sort of curate in your own career. We hear from vintage Luxman users every week for sure, if not every day, around North America who have used these products for decades, and maybe they need a little bit of service or a little attention at this point. 40 years on, in some cases 50 years on. It's quite amazing that we have this sort of legacy and this fan base of users. Sometimes we can help these people directly, and sometimes we have to refer them to third-party servicers because that's the best way to help them. But it's kind of amazing. Obviously, there are other brands out there who, share a long experience as well. But Luxman is one of the older brands, and because we had a legacy of vacuum tube product and transistor product and analog turntables of very high quality, our brand is maybe perceived a little bit higher than some of the other mid-grade consumer brands from long ago. And of course today, we've only gone really high-end, back to our roots, because we don't have the marketing pressures of some of the past, ownership of Luxman's brand, both in North America and around the world.
100 years of Luxman Products is amazing. So what can we expect with this 100-year anniversary? This is huge. This is big.
Well, I'm under a bit of quarantine with some of this information because they don't really want to release it until January 1st, but I'll give you a little peek. So while we have produced some very high quality headphone amplifiers in the past, they have prepared for the anniversary year as part of our, quote, Centennial collection. Centennial. There will be a special logo in platinum called Centennial.
That's nice.
Special logo. They prepared something called the P100, which is a state-of-the-art, most sophisticated, Class A headphone amplifier with every possible connectivity option available. Whether you want Pentacon or balanced or whatever you want, this thing is soup to nuts the best effort that they've ever done. But of course it's at an elevated price, but it's also the best thing they've ever made. So I bring this up because so many people get into our hobby or become acclimated toward the high end through an introduction via headphone listening, especially young people. I bring this up because I understand and I respect that headphone listening is a happening thing around the world, and that high-end headphones and the high-end headphone or head-fi experience is a real thing and an important thing. And so I think it's very cool and very appropriate that one of the first products for the anniversary year is a high-end headphone amp. And I look forward to it. I've seen some renderings of it, and it looks spectacular. But I can't show you anything now, I'm sorry.
I mean, this is amazing. It's like a sneak peek of what we're going to get to experience next year. And,
That's true.
And we'll get to see, hopefully, all of these, whatever you guys have planned for the centennial anniversary of Luxman at Expona, which makes it even more of a big deal. Like, it's huge.
Yes, there'll be a big surprise at Expona. I really can't get into it, but there'll be a special limited edition set of Luxman components. There'll be a special centennial edition limited set, so it's virtually a stack, a system of Luxman components, all matched. So the finish will be a little more exotic than what you're used to. The product will have special identification plates, laser etched, so sequential serial numbers from a very limited batch of product. And you will see those at Expona. And then as the year progresses, there'll be some further introductions because we can't make everything that we want to introduce all at the same time. I mean, the factory is busy, and it's not a large factory. We're not scaled to the size of, let's say, a Yamaha or a Denon or something like that. We're not building surround sound receivers, 10,000 at a time for Best Buy. That's not what we do. We're a very boutique, bench-built, super high-quality, handmade product line, and they have to stagger these introductions over the months of next year, in addition to which there is going to be a 100th anniversary book.
Oh.
A coffee table book that you can buy or acquire, which will be like the 100th centennial history of the company. So much of what we've talked about, but with much, much greater detail and accuracy than what I can impart in this video, will be addressed in great detail and with lots of pictures and illustrations. So it's going to be cool and a lot of fun. That'll come during the summer sometime. That book.
That's amazing. Like, if you didn't get me hooked with this big, anniversary lineup that you guys got coming out, I love books and I love that kind of historical stuff. Everybody knows I like to do history documentaries and all that. So I'm very pumped and excited. And I think over time, Luxman's made a big difference in the industry for sure. If you enjoyed this history of Luxman, you're going to love the entire podcast, which you can watch right here. It's on the Expona YouTube channel, where we learn all about the brand, their products, and their history even more in depth.